today marked in the history of elections in Kenya a rather regrettable turn of events. The morning began very well. I think we had received very strong assurances from the IEBC as to what they would be willing to do. We saw the presser 2 days ago about the deployment of police and the assurances that they would give a free, fair, credible election. And I think the start of the elections went very well. I think later in the day, we saw very unfortunate incidences, people attempting to bribe voters on the queues, masked goons attempting to access polling stations. And what we saw today, despite the assurances of the Cabinet Secretary for the Interior, where we expected security agencies to be the ones keeping the peace, we saw civilians being the ones who were enforcing law and order and preventing preventing goons from entering polling stations, trying to assess whether policemen could be trusted to access polling stations. We saw civilians in some instances asking police to show them what they had in their cars. I think what is clear from the by-elections today is Kenyans don't trust the security sector. Kenyans don't trust the electoral body to safeguard and create an environment for the election that is free from corruption, free from intimidation, free from violence. But overall, I thought the way in which the election went today, by and large, in terms of the voting process, was good. The attempt to induce someone to vote for you in a particular way or to facilitate their access to the polling station to vote is prohibited by the Election Offences Act. If you look at the way the Election Offences Act is crafted, it is intended to give effect to Articles 81 and 86 of the Constitution. The understanding is that wherever you have an election, it must represent the free expression of the will of the voters. You cannot have the free expression of the will of the voters if you have people putting pressure, whether it's financially or otherwise, because you can do it through money or through violence, for people to vote in a certain way. Whenever you're facilitating someone to access a polling station, you're not telling them to vote with their conscience. You're telling them, please remember us when you get there. So whether you acknowledge it openly or not, you are trying to influence the way a voter casts their ballot, and that is one of the things that the Electoral Code of Conduct and the Election Offences Act expressly prohibit. Okay. If you look at the Election Offences Act, particularly Section 14, it prohibits the use of state resources during elections.
Yes.
And the understanding is that any time you see a state officer expending resources, first of all, we must appreciate they're not personal resources. And so there are no state officers who are altruistically going about distributing money. Money is coming from somewhere. In the context of an election, and I believe we spoke about this the last time I was here,
yes,
if you're seeing money being distributed wantonly, the question you want to ask is, from which budget are these funds coming from? The reality is the money that we have seen expended in Ol Kalou throughout the electoral process cannot be traced to any particular budget. So either the people who are distributing the money got their money through illicit ways, or they diverted funds from a particular county or state budget towards those elections. That cannot be development for two reasons. One, all development must be accountable, must be transparent, and must be influenced by public participation, which means if you're bringing us gas cylinders, you must show us that the public was consulted and they said what we want as development is gas cylinders. There was no evidence that the people of Ol Kalou were consulted as to whether they want boats or gas cylinders, or they want to be given unga, or they want to be given mattresses. So there's no development which does not have people at the heart of it. But most importantly, there is no development which is not attributable to a budget, because when you have a budget, it means you have oversight. There is no one today who can account for that, whether it's 10 billion or 14 billion or 16 billion, if the former Deputy President is to be believed, no one can account for the funds which have been used in Ol Kalou today. What that means is chances are we will not have access to certain public services elsewhere because the money was diverted towards Ol Kalou. Was it proved that Ol Kalou needed that money? No. Can we account for that money? No. So that cannot necessarily be said to be development. But most importantly, the timing of it is suspect. Why did they not do this development last year? 5 months ago. Why must they do it in the election period? That points to an indication that they wanted to sway the voters to vote a certain way.
So when Ruto came with the two things, the bottom-up economics together with the dynasty versus Sassola, he touched a raw nerve. So these people gave him their heart. They gave him their soul. They are the most disappointed people in the Mount Kenya region with the William Ruto performance. So if he won it there, if he were to win it there, because I get the counting is still going on, I don't send a message that the disappointment is not that big. And therefore the president has a hope of getting support in the Mount Kenya region. But I think he ruined the situation, because even if you were to win, there's the deployment of excess police. It looks more like an occupying force than a police which is supposed to police an election. You remember when an electoral area is declared, IEBC actually becomes the people in charge of the police in an electoral area. They become IEBC, the police officers become IEBC officials. That in deployment, excess in deployment, it sent a message that we are an occupied people. It's a very bad message to the citizens. I think the government in India is someone device. There are some area where you don't need that level, because the people already have a feeling that you are just not one of them. You just fired your deputy who happened to come from there. Now, when you send that level of police, what they see is an invading army. They don't see the police coming to protect the vote. Now, that's a bad message for the government to send anywhere. Also, it makes the winning not look a win. Even if you were to win with that kind of police, you wouldn't just say that he intimidated people. He brought all these police that, remember he said that it forced citizens to enforce security by refusing masked people to. Now, that's already a violation of law. Remember there is a high court ruling. In fact, I even think it may have been reversed by the Court of Appeal, that the police must, when dealing with the public, must clearly identify themselves. That they cannot have baglavas and those kind of things, okay? Yeah. They were having them in Olekalau. You also saw that people in Brandos actually shooting in the air. Now, that has given the government and IEBC a really very bad image. And I think that image, the government needs to take measures to correct this. Okay. Because you can end up preparing people basically for a very bad situation in 2027 when people lose faith in our police. Police is the glue that needs society together. The moment the faith with the police breaks, remember the country has only 126,000 policemen or so. They can't protect us if that faith is broken. So I think whoever deployed the police to allow this size, they need to think again.
If you look at the elections general regulations, the law is clear that the polling station is a restricted place. Most polling stations are just classrooms, so they're very small rooms, right? So you cannot allow too many people if the proper polling process is to be followed. So if you look at the elections general regulations, it presupposes the following people. The person in charge of the polling station is a presiding officer. They're the person to whom the security actors report. They're deputized by a deputy presiding officer. In case anything happened, the DPO would be the one to take over. Then there are about 7 polling clerks who are there to assist with identification, with handing out the ballot papers, with marking your finger once you have voted, with assisting you to vote if for whatever reason you need assistance. So there's about 7 clerks who are allocated in the polling station. Then you have agents. The law presupposes that you have a right as a candidate to monitor the process. So you can be there in person, or you can have someone in your stead who is your agent. By law, you can't both be present. So if the agent is present, the candidate must leave and vice versa.
Is there anything like super agents?
No, there is no, and we saw the same arguments coming out in Mbere, where certain former government officials came and purported to be super agents. There's no such thing in law. Once you are accredited as an agent, you have a right to be present unless your candidate is present. And then, of course, we have election observers who are impartial actors who come to monitor the process, and voters come in as and when they need to vote. The law, as you rightly pointed out, requires that as a voter, you are only allowed to be present while you are voting. So once you are done with voting, you're required to exit the polling station for good order. As I said, the space is restricted, so others must be able to come in and cast their vote. What we saw from the opposition is, I think, an overshoot of Mbere, where there was a feeling that once we have voted, we are not sure that our votes will count. And so there was a directive issued by the former Deputy President that once you vote, make sure you come and guard your votes. There is no law that allows voters to remain and guard their votes. That's why you have agents, that's why you have observers.
Okay.
When it comes to campaign financing regulations, I do not think, first of all, that the architecture we have for campaign finance regulation is workable for two reasons. One, it presupposes a context that is utopian. It does not exist. So it presupposes that Kenyan politicians are good, well-mannered people who have the capacity to exercise restraint and report themselves if they do the wrong thing. For example, the law presupposes that if you're a candidate and you receive public funds, that you will surrender the funds to the IEBC. Now, I have never seen a Kenyan politician surrendering funds other than when they want to induce people to vote for them or to get support. The law also presupposes that you will operate within certain limits, and that's why the IEBC put limits for each electoral seat. Now, if we were to work with the estimates that the IEBC gave us, the most that could be spent is for a presidential election, which was at about 4.4 billion.
Yes.
If we used, by the figures which have been touted, between 10 and 16 billion in Olkalau alone, is there any possibility, and this is one constituency, is there any possibility that the IEBC can monitor 290? I don't foresee it. So IEBC lacks the capacity to enforce it. It also presupposes and puts a lot of deference to candidates to do the right thing, which I don't think our environment presupposes. But third and more importantly for me, the environment in which we do business in Kenya, we are a very cash-based economy. A lot of money changes hands, and we've seen MPs showing us thousands of dollars in their houses and things like that. The way in which our economy operates makes it very difficult to track money. So that then brought into the electoral process tells you it is unlikely that we will properly track money during elections.
The use of money in the Mount Kenya region will have no impact because these people understand that they have accepted the fact they deserve development. When you bring money and a project during the campaign, these people understand and you are now bribing them, which is illegal. So they will take your money, but they are unlikely to give you the vote. But now, why I say in the region by region, Mbeere North, it was not because of money. Mbeere North has an interesting history. I wanted to tell you that. First of all, that election was clearly stolen. Okay? That is number two.
The court's cleared.
Number two, well, the court cleared, yes. But,
yes.
we saw unmarked vehicles, we saw a lot of things. But let me tell you something about Mbeere. It's a funny place. There was a time the president, we didn't like President Moi during Kano, that region, our region. And Muturi ran on the Kano ticket in a by-election in Mbeere and won the election. But during the general election, the president didn't even get 1,000 votes in Mbeere. You want the presidential vote. So the clans in some areas in the Mount Kenya region, they have a lot of weight, okay? So you have to look the fellow which clan he come from, then you have to look the history of the candidate themselves. So the local politics now come to play, not in the Kikuyu part of Mount Kenya region. Okay. They don't have those clans we have down there. But the eastern side, we have a lot of clan issues. That is why you cannot say in Mbeere what you saw was a support of William Ruto. If you want to wait, you wait in Mbeere in the election, you will see them voting probably 95 or 96% to the opposition candidate when the general election comes. And still, if there's a candidate UDA, they may still elect that candidate. So you can't, there's local dynamics which come to play in by elections, which are not available in the general election to favor the president.
I think there's a general disappointment in the IEBC and how it has conducted the by-election up until now. Not just this by-election, but we had 4 other by-elections last year. And there was hue and cry as to whether or not the IEBC does have teeth to bite when it comes to violations. My feeling is that the IEBC has been given very extensive powers, both by the Constitution and by the Elections Act, but it has chosen not to exercise the full breadth of its powers. I'll give an example. If you look at the Electoral Code of Conduct, when it comes to censuring wrongful conduct, whether it's misuse of state resources or it's bribery or violence, the IEBC has a plethora of ways it can censure this conduct.
Okay.
The least of it is warnings, and that's the one that the IEBC unfortunately tends to use the most. But as we have seen, it's the least efficacious. So what IEBC tends to do repeatedly is say, we have warned you, we have warned you. The law presupposes that that is a starting point, but that's not the end point. So there should be a progression of more serious sanctions if the violations continue. So you move from formal warnings to fines. We have seen the IEBC issue fines last year, Kasipul Kabondo. We have seen an attempt to issue fines in these by-elections, Wanjiku Mohia and David Gekaria. Those processes have been stopped by the courts. We are going to wait and see the outcome of those. But I believe, in my view, if the IEBC really wanted to flex its muscles, they really do have the power to. For example, the Electoral Code of Conduct presupposes that political parties will man their candidates, their agent supporters, and their own officials, so that they will enforce the Electoral Code of Conduct themselves. One of the ways the IEBC can get political parties to comply is using the power to disqualify a candidate or to disqualify a party from fielding a candidate. That is a power the IEBC has under the Electoral Code of Conduct. We have not seen the IEBC doing that. So the few people who have been censured, whether you're looking at Gekaria or Wanjiku Mohia, they're not the ones who have committed the most egregious violations, in my view. And therefore, the IEBC could, if it wanted, have taken more serious action and built credibility that it can actually hold a credible election. We are yet to see them giving us that confidence.
Okay.